Hello, everybody. I mean, one would think that with all the presentations earlier, Akiemi will learn not to describe people and ascribe them to certain qualities. So he said, oh, I'm a journalist, and then I'm a business developer, two opposite things. That way he has biased your mind even before you saw me. I don't know which one you think I look like, but we'll talk, you know. So, my talk today is going to be possible with the help of every one of you. So I encourage everybody, eyes up, eyes front. Let's do this together. Earlier, when one of the speakers was talking, he mentioned something very fascinating. And that was the question. He said, were our forefathers unlucky or are we lucky? So does it mean that those who were born during the time that slavery was an option, were they unlucky or are we the lucky ones? I think that I like to say that there is no luck anywhere. Because whilst they had no choice to go across borders, today we are practically choosing to disconnect ourselves from the things that make us who we are, without anybody giving us a tree of forgetfulness or water to drink. And that is why I say that stories will save Africa. So when you meet me for the first time, I like to say that I'm a village girl. I don't just say it because it makes me feel eccentric. I say it because it is true. I spent almost all my life in my father's village in rural Edo State. The interesting thing is when I tell people that I'm from Edo State, the first thing that comes to their head is, oh, you should be from Benin. Or did you grow up in Benin? Did you go to Uniben? I didn't. I grew up in a small town called Iroa. It's a very sleepy town. And it's so sleepy that I had to go to school 20 minutes away every day to secondary school because there were no good secondary schools in my own hometown. So what that meant was I practically had to be, immersed in my culture and in my traditions and in our stories for me to understand what it was. So it wasn't an esoteric thing for me. It was just everyday life. Now I'm going to show you two images. Does this work? Okay. I don't know if anybody has seen any of these two. So on the left side you have Harry Potter and then on the right side you have The Witcher. Both of them are very popular, multi-billion-dollar movies. I mean, they are instantly recognizable. How many of us here have seen either of them? Seen, read, heard? How many? I have. Now, what is the common denominator between both stories? Witchcraft. So I'm here today to talk about how witchcraft has colored our stories and has engineered our biases towards African stories. Now, when you look at these two, people feel very educated when they're telling you about Hogwarts, or when they're telling you about Slytherin or factors or things that you learn in Harry Potter. When you read very recently, The Witcher was one of the things that was like a woke calculator on Twitter. So I'm watching The Witcher, and then you want to tell people, what you have learned from The Witcher. At the end of everything, what you can see is witchcraft. And that's the thing that's one of the things that my people are most known for. People meet me every day, and the first thing they ask me, after they've asked me if I grew up in Benin, is, oh, where did you fly from? So as far as people are concerned, if you're from Edo State, there's some sort of serum they give us when we're just born so that we learn how to fly. It's the story that has gone over and over again. And it's okay, because it's a story. But I've learned over time, and I'm here to say that you cannot fight a stereotype with stereotype. You cannot fight ignorance with ignorance. So I would be in a crazy position if I came here and I said, oh, I'm from Edo State, and then go on to do things that perpetuate that stereotype because I do not know better. But unfortunately for some people, and very fortunately for me, I grew up with my people, and if witchcraft could kill, I should have been dead. But we digress. More importantly, I want us to look at what it means when we're talking about telling African stories. Most of the time, let me tell you a story. We're telling African stories. When I was 19 years old, I moved for the very first time from rural Edo State. And I did not go small. I did not move to Benin. Instead, I moved to the vast Federal Capital Territory on my own. So this meant that whenever I saw somebody who had a very Edo adjacent name, my face would light up. And I would be, oh, where are you from? And they would tell me their village. And the next plausible question for me would always be, have you been there? What do you like about your village? And the person would stutter, look at me with some sort of embarrassment, and say no. And for a long time, I couldn't understand how somebody could be from a place and has never been to the place, has never been to the local government. In fact, I have met people who do not know the local government their villages are situated in. It's not a joke. If we take a poll here and we ask people to fill out their villages and their local government, we're going to have a problem. The only times that people know their local government is when they want to get local government of origin certificates. So what does that mean? It means that over time, people have been burdened with the biases that have laced their stories, that they are so afraid to search for these stories for themselves. And when you don't know your own stories, it is easy for you to believe anything that is told to you. You do not know your heroes, you do not know their flaws, you don't know your anti-heroes, you don't know what made them anti-heroes. You just chose to believe everything that popular culture has brought to your attention, whilst you are very close to the source material. So what are African stories, and what does it mean to tell them authentically? How are some Africans biased against African stories? It is narration for the foreign gaze, and where is home? So many things have been said today about what home means and what identity means. So I think that has been answered for itself. But let me talk about narrating for the foreign gaze. Here we have a lot of writers, we have journalists, we have people who have gone on to shape culture and who are continuously shaping culture. One of the things that I noticed when I first joined journalism was that when I had to pitch stories, the pitching editor, the commissioning editors would want to structure your stories in such ways that it fits their concept of what an African story should be. So I say I want to tell stories about teenage pregnancy in Edo State. And somehow they would always want to link it to the fact that a lot of people travel abroad. I mean, Italy is our second home, is the stereotype that we've been given. And whenever that happens, I found it very nauseating. And I started to imagine, if I was not immersed in my stories the way that I was, would I have been more pliable, to fit in my stories with the way that the commissioning editors would have rather I did? A lot of the times when you hear people say that they want to tell African stories, it's usually either in the way that Beyoncé has done in all her music videos very recently, no offense, or it's in the way that somebody who wants to shoot, I was going to mention a name but I wouldn't, or people who come to shoot documentaries at home, they carry their cameras, they go to a place that they have never been before, they put the cameras down, and they say, start talking. What do you people say you people need in this community again? How many years have you people been doing this barbaric thing? You have imported your biases based on certain ignorances that you have refused to clear up, and you have decided to tell African stories. And the unfortunate thing is that these are the people who get the grants, who get the funding to tell these so-called African stories. Now, how are some Africans biased against Africa? If I go home, they will kill me. It's a thing. Like, you meet people, if I go home, they will kill me. So if you are afraid that if you go to your villages, you are going to die, what happens to learning the stories of the places that you were born in? Earlier, we listened to a talk where she was talking about how experiences and rituals dictate where you actually come from. But we have people who have been in Ilorin for 5 years and they do not even know the stories of Ilorin. So in this case, I'm not even asking you to go to the places where they will kill you. I'm asking you to really actually understand the stories of the places where you are in. But we have no intention of doing that, except maybe there's a fancy prize attached to it, or some white man wants to wear dashiki for the week. You guys, I mean, now, we keep talking about problems and how not telling African stories authentically is a problem. So what then should we do? The first thing I have said is that we should quit assuming, take time to understand roots and stories. We've heard so much about roots today, and sometimes you feel like you're not authentic enough, you're not African enough. As somebody who grew up in Edo State and does not speak fluent Isha, I am embarrassed every single time somebody says, oh, you don't speak any of the language as fluently as possible. And it was until recently I realized that what my parents were trying to do was a situation where I was not authentically Edo, so that they did not feel embarrassed that they raised their kids in the village. And it's a systemic thing that is going to go on over and over and over again, because somehow, even though we are not taken out of the land forcefully, we have decided to find ways to forcefully remove or insulate ourselves from the land so that we do not seem as though we're too connected and stuck. But how do you know what to save if you do not even know the people you are trying to save? How do you understand what in yourself to correct if you don't even take the time to understand yourself enough? Number two, stop stereotyping to fit narratives you think that others will hear. As an Edo person, it's an icebreaker and a very popular joke. If I had gotten up here and said, oh, hi, I am Anita and I fly at night. It is the thing that you would want to hear. It is the thing that would probably make all of you laugh if I had said it at the very beginning. But it's a self-stereotype that I will continue to perpetrate. That is not true. But I will continue to do it because I think that that's what you're going to hear and that's what you like to hear. But in essence, I will tell a lie over and over and over again that the truth becomes a lie. And that's what we do when we tell some of our stories. When we go to a land to visit and then other people ask us, so how was it studying in Akwa Ibom? Oh my God, they eat people there. You've never seen a human being get eaten in front of you, but you schooled there and maybe somebody spread some sort of tale about how you should avoid certain parts of town. And then that was all you remembered because of the biases that you have programmed your mind to have to say about the people. Nothing about their hospitality mattered. Nothing about how you enjoyed your stay mattered. The first thing you want to tell people is the stereotype that you think that they like to hear about certain places. Now, question your motive every time you set out to place African story on projects. Writers, journalists, photographers, cultural critics, every time they give you a grant, every time they come and give you a project, and they say, hey, so what do you want to do? We want to hear African stories. Like, we're currently in a gold rush for African stories. But let me bust your bubble. When it's not African stories they want to hear, it's stories from Africa that sound good. Now, it is our jobs as enlightened people in the room who know better to say, this is the story I want to tell. Because when people hear African stories, I think that they sort of expect that it has to look like Kente and Akara. But it doesn't. It's just stories of people who are born in this place, as indigenous to them as it is. And at every point you want to over-elevate the story. At every point you want to over-classify the story. Remember that it's really just stories of people. Stories of you, stories of me, stories of where you're from. And if you do too much or do too little, you are part of the problem. And then you're shaping a narrative that does not go away. Like all the narratives that we've had about Africa, it is so hard for you to clean them because we put our stories, we just place a tag on them and we don't care what they do. The last thing is, visit your hometowns as much as possible if you can. And if you can't, try to understand the dynamics of the place you actually grew up in. Because it's not just enough to say that we don't want to be tied to places. You should also have some sort of content from the places that you have decided to call home. Lastly, I'm saying go home. Your village people are not looking for you. They are looking up to you instead, hoping your honesty about their stories speed up their development. Thank you.